In a small, dusty town where life moved at a slow pace, there lived a young girl who had dreams bigger than her circumstances. Her name wasn't important to most people. What mattered was that she came from one of the poorest families in the area. The streets around her home were lined with cracked sidewalks and faded paint on the walls of old buildings. Money was tight for her family, so tight that buying new clothes or toys was out of the question. Her father worked odd jobs, fixing things here and there, while her mother sewed clothes for neighbors to earn a little extra cash. Despite their struggles, they loved each other deeply, and the girl always found ways to keep herself happy. This young girl had something special about her, though no one seemed to notice it at first. She had a fascination with music. It all started one rainy afternoon when she stumbled upon an abandoned violin lying near a dumpster behind an old shop. The wood was scratched, and one of the strings was missing, but to her, it looked like treasure. She picked it up carefully, brushed off the dirt, and took it home. At first, she didn't know how to play it. No one in her family knew anything about music, let alone violins. But she was determined to figure it out. Every evening after finishing her chores, she would sit by the window, holding the violin awkwardly under her chin. Using videos she found online, she taught herself how to hold the bow, pluck the strings, and eventually produce sounds that resembled notes. Of course, her early attempts were far from perfect. Sometimes the screeching noise made her parents cover their ears and laugh. "What are you trying to do? Scare away the birds?" her dad joked once, ruffling her hair affectionately. Even though they teased her, they never told her to stop. Deep down, they admired her persistence. At school, things weren't as kind. In a place where kids often judged others based on what they wore or what they owned, the girl stood out, not in a good way. Her uniform was patched up, her shoes were worn out, and her lunchbox usually contained only a piece of bread and some fruit. Some of her classmates liked to make fun of her for being different. They whispered behind her back, calling her names and making jokes about her shabby appearance. She tried not to let it bother her, focusing instead on her studies and her secret passion for the violin. One day, during a school assembly, the teacher announced that students could volunteer to show off a hidden talent. The idea excited many kids. One boy said he could juggle oranges, another claimed he could solve a Rubik's Cube in record time, and a group of girls planned to perform a dance routine. As the teacher went around asking who else wanted to participate, someone shouted, "Hey, why doesn't she try? Maybe she can play us a tune." Everyone turned to look at the girl sitting quietly in the corner, clutching her battered violin. Room filled with laughter. "Yeah, come on, let's hear it," another voice chimed in. The girl felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment. She wanted to shrink into her seat and disappear, but then something inside her stirred. She thought about all those hours she spent practicing alone, all the time she pressed through frustration just to get a single note right. If nothing else, she deserved a chance to prove herself, even if it meant facing ridicule. Reluctantly, she stood up and walked toward the front of the room. The laughter grew louder as she adjusted the violin, which looked even more out of place, in the brightly lit gymnasium. She closed her eyes, blocking out the snickers and whispers. Taking a deep breath, she drew the bow across the strings. At first, the sound wobbled, uneven and uncertain. But then, something magical happened. Slowly, a melody began to emerge, a soft, soulful tune that silenced the room. No one expected what came next. The girl poured every ounce of emotion into her playing. Every hardship, every lonely moment, every tear shed in silence, it all came, pouring out through the music. The scratchy notes transformed into something breathtakingly beautiful. One by one, heads turned toward the stage. Mouths that had been open in mockery now hung agape in awe. By the end of the piece, you could have heard a pin drop in the room. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then someone started clapping. Another joined in, and soon the entire gymnasium erupted into applause. That day changed everything. For the girl, for her classmates, and for the teachers who realized they had underestimated her. What began as a cruel joke ended with tears, streaming down faces and a newfound respect for a quiet, determined girl who dared to dream against all odds. The moment the last note faded into the air, the gymnasium was silent. It wasn't the kind of silence that feels awkward or uncomfortable. It was the kind that makes you hold your breath, as if breaking it might ruin something sacred. The girl stood frozen, her hands still gripping the violin and bow, unsure of what to do next. Her heart pounded in her chest like a drum, each beat echoing louder than the music she had just played. She glanced up nervously, scanning the sea of faces staring back at her. For weeks, months, maybe even years, these same classmates had mocked her for being poor, for wearing clothes with patches, for bringing plain meals to lunch. They had laughed when they saw her carrying the old beaten-up violin around school, calling it a stick with strings. But now, their expressions were completely different. Some kids looked stunned, their mouths slightly open. Others had tears glistening in their eyes, though they tried to hide them by blinking rapidly. Even the teachers, who usually kept straight faces during assemblies, seemed shaken. One of them dabbed at the corner of her eye with a tissue. Finally, someone broke the silence. A boy sitting near the front, someone who had teased her earlier, started clapping. At first it was slow, hesitant, almost like he couldn't believe what he was doing. Then another student joined in, followed by another, until the entire room erupted into applause. The sound filled the gymnasium, bouncing off the walls and ceiling, growing louder and more powerful with every passing second. The girl felt her throat tighten. She didn't know whether to cry, smile, or run away. Instead, she did none of those things. She simply stood there, letting the moment wash over her. When the clapping finally died down, the principal stepped forward. He was a tall man with graying hair and glasses perched on the edge of his nose. Normally he spoke in a serious tone, but today his voice cracked slightly as he addressed the crowd. "That was incredible," he said, pausing to clear his throat. "I don't think any of us expected that. Truly remarkable." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The girl nodded shyly, her fingers fidgeting with the strap of the violin. She didn't trust herself to speak yet. After the assembly ended, the girl hurried out of the gymnasium, eager to escape the attention. But outside, a group of students waited for her. These weren't the friends she'd always wished she had. They were some of the same kids who used to tease her. For a moment she froze, wondering if they were going to make fun of her again. Instead, one of them, a girl with curly hair and freckles, spoke up. "Hey," she said softly. "That was amazing. Like, really, really good." The girl blinked, surprised. "Thanks," she murmured, clutching the violin closer to her chest. Another classmate chimed in. "Where did you learn to play like that?" This question caught her off guard. How could she explain that she hadn't learned from anyone? That she had spent countless nights watching videos online, mimicking sounds she heard, and practicing until her fingers ached. She shrugged and muttered, "Just figured it out." Word about her performance spread quickly throughout the school. By the next day, everyone was talking about it. Teachers stopped her in the hallway to congratulate her. Even the janitor gave her a thumbs up as he mopped the floors. But not everything changed overnight. There were still whispers in the hallways, some of them mean-spirited. "She probably got lucky," one kid muttered under his breath. "Bet she can't do it again." Hearing comments like that stung, but she tried to ignore them. Deep down, she knew what she was capable of, and that was enough, for now. A few days later, something unexpected happened. The music teacher, a kind woman in her 50s with a warm smile, approached her after class. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" she asked gently. The girl hesitated before nodding and following her to the empty classroom. The teacher gestured for her to sit down, then pulled up a chair across from her. "I wanted to tell you how moved I was by your performance," she began. "It's rare to hear someone play with so much emotion, especially at your age." The girl blushed, unsure of how to respond. She stared at the floor, tracing patterns on the tiles with her shoe. Sensing her discomfort, the teacher continued, "I've been teaching music here for over 20 years, and I've never seen raw talent like yours. You have a gift. Have you ever thought about taking lessons?" The question caught her off guard. Lessons? She had never dared to imagine such a thing. Music lessons cost money, money her family didn't have. I don't know, she stammered. We can't afford it. The teacher smiled reassuringly. Don't worry about that. If you're willing to put in the work, I'll find a way to help you. We have a few spare violins in the storage room and I can teach you myself. During my free periods, the girl's eyes widened. Was this really happening? Was someone offering to guide her, to take her passion seriously? Overwhelmed, she nodded slowly. Okay, she whispered, her voice barely audible. The teacher patted her shoulder encouragingly. Good, let's start tomorrow. From that day on, the girl's life began to shift in ways she hadn't imagined. Every afternoon, she stayed late at school, practicing under the guidance of the music teacher. At first, it was challenging. The teacher pointed out flaws in her technique, how she held the bow too tightly, how her posture needed adjustment, and corrected them patiently. Progress was slow, but the girl was determined. She practiced tirelessly, sometimes staying in the music room long after everyone else had gone home. The quiet hum of the fluorescent lights above became her companion as she worked through scales and pieces note by note. Her classmates noticed the change in her. She no longer walked with her head down, avoiding eye contact. Instead, she carried herself with a newfound confidence, her steps lighter, her smile brighter. People started treating her differently, not because of pity, but because they genuinely admired her dedication. Even the kids who had once teased her began to respect her, acknowledging her hard work and talent. But the journey wasn't without its challenges. Some days, frustration overwhelmed her. There were moments when her fingers fumbled over difficult passages, and she wondered if she'd ever get it right. Doubts crept in, whispering that maybe she wasn't cut out for this after all. On those days, the teacher reminded her why she started. Remember the song you played at the assembly? She said one afternoon. You didn't learn that from me. You found it within yourself. That's proof that you're meant to do this. Slowly but surely, the girl improved. She learned to read sheet music, to understand rhythm and dynamics. She discovered composers whose work stirred her soul: Bach, Mozart, Tchaikovsky. Each piece she mastered felt like a victory, not just for her skills, but for her spirit. Music became her refuge, a place where she could escape the hardships of her daily life and lose herself in beauty. One evening, as she packed up her things to leave the music room, the teacher handed her a flyer. There's a local youth talent showcase happening next month, she explained. I think you should sign up. The girl hesitated, fear creeping in. Performing in front of her classmates was one thing, but strangers? That felt like a whole new level of terrifying. Sensing her hesitation, the teacher added, You don't have to decide right away, just think about it. That night, lying awake in bed, the girl thought about the flyer. She pictured herself standing on a stage, playing for an audience that didn't know her story. Would they see past her worn-out shoes and patched-up clothes? Would they hear the music she poured her heart into? Or would they dismiss her, just like some people had done before? As sleep finally claimed her, one thought lingered in her mind. What if I could inspire someone else the way I inspired my classmates? The girl spent days thinking about the talent showcase. The idea of performing in front of strangers made her stomach churn with nerves, but deep down, she couldn't ignore the tiny spark of excitement that flickered inside her. What if this was her chance to prove to herself and to the world that her music mattered? She didn't want to let fear hold her back, not after everything she had already overcome. When she finally told the music teacher that she wanted to participate, the woman beamed with pride. I knew you'd say yes, she said, her eyes twinkling behind her glasses. Now we need to pick a piece that will show off your strengths. Something emotional, something powerful. Together they sifted through sheet music, listening to recordings and discussing which song would resonate most. After hours of deliberation, they settled on a hauntingly beautiful composition that seemed to mirror the girl's own journey, full of struggle, resilience, and hope. With the showcase just a few weeks away, the girl threw herself into practice. Every spare moment was dedicated to perfecting the piece. She stayed late at school, practicing in the quiet music room until her Fingers ached and her arms felt like lead. At home, she hummed the melody under her breath while helping her mother cook dinner or washing dishes. Even in her dreams, she heard the notes swirling around her, urging her forward. But life wasn't going to make things easy for her. One afternoon, as she walked home from school, she noticed her father sitting on the steps of their small apartment building. His head was bowed and his hands rested heavily on his knees. When she approached him, he looked up, his face etched with worry. "We're having a tough month," he admitted quietly. "The jobs are drying up and I don't know how we'll manage." The girl's heart sank. Money was always tight, but hearing her father sound so defeated broke something inside her. She wanted to help, to take some of the burden off his shoulders. But what could she do? All she had was her violin, and even that belonged to the school now. Still, she refused to give up on her dream. If anything, her family's struggles fueled her determination. She promised herself that one day, she would use her music to change their lives. As the days passed, the pressure mounted. Some classmates encouraged her, saying they were excited to see her perform. Others weren't so kind. "What makes you think anyone will care about your little performance?" One boy sneered during lunch. "You're just a nobody with a broken-down violin." His words stung, but instead of letting them crush her spirit, she used them as fuel. "Fine," she thought. "If you think I'm nothing, then I'll show you exactly who I am." The night before the showcase, the girl barely slept. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, running through the piece in her mind. What if she messed up? What if she forgot a section or dropped her bow? Worst of all, what if no one cared? Her thoughts raced in circles until exhaustion finally pulled her into a restless sleep. The next morning, she woke up early, her stomach tied in knots. Her mother helped her get ready, brushing her hair neatly and smoothing out her best dress, a hand-me-down from a neighbor. "You look beautiful," her mother said softly, giving her a hug. "Remember, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. You've already made us proud." When she arrived at the venue, a small community center, decorated with twinkling fairy lights and colorful banners, her nerves kicked into overdrive. The room buzzed with chatter as families and friends gathered to watch the performances. Other participants milled about, tuning guitars, adjusting microphones, and rehearsing last-minute lines. The girl clutched her violin case tightly, feeling out of place among the polished instruments and confident smiles. Backstage, the music teacher found her pacing nervously. "Take a deep breath," she said, placing a reassuring hand on the girl's shoulder. "You've worked so hard for this. Trust yourself. Trust the music." The girl nodded, though her hands trembled as she adjusted the strap of her borrowed violin. Finally, it was her turn. As her name was called, she stepped onto the stage, the spotlight blinding her for a moment. The audience fell silent, hundreds of eyes fixed on her. For a split second, panic threatened to overwhelm her, but then she remembered why she was there. Not for fame or applause, but because music had given her a voice when she felt voiceless. She closed her eyes, drew the bow across the strings, and began to play. From the very first note, the room transformed. The melody soared, filling every corner with raw emotion. It was as if the girl wasn't just playing the violin, she was telling her story, sharing her pain, her joy, her hopes, and her dreams. People leaned forward in their seats, captivated. Parents held their children closer. Friends exchanged glances, their faces reflecting awe and admiration. Halfway through the piece, something remarkable happened. A man sitting near the front, a stranger dressed in a suit, pulled out his phone and started recording. Within minutes, the video clip was uploaded online, accompanied by a caption. "A young musician pours her soul into her performance. Watch till the end. It'll leave you speechless." By the time the girl finished playing, the crowd erupted into applause, cheering and whistling as tears streamed down many faces. The man's words hung in the air, and for a moment, the girl wasn't sure she had heard him correctly. A producer? Someone who actually worked in the world of music? She felt her heart skip a beat as he continued speaking. "I've been doing this for years, and I can tell when someone has something special," he said, his voice calm but sincere. "Your performance tonight It wasn't just about skill. It was about emotion, authenticity. That's rare these days. The girl blinked, unsure of how to respond. She had never imagined anyone like him paying attention to her, let alone saying such kind things. Her cheeks flushed red as she stammered, "Thank you. I didn't think anyone would notice." The man chuckled softly, shaking his head. "How could they not? You have a gift, and if you're willing, I'd love to help you share it with more people." He handed her a business card which she accepted with trembling hands. On it was printed his name, title, and contact information. "Call me when you're ready," he said with a warm smile before excusing himself to talk to other performers. As he walked away, the girl stared at the card, her mind racing. Was this real? Could this really be happening? For the rest of the evening, she floated on a cloud of disbelief and excitement. People kept coming up to her, congratulating her, asking questions about her music. Some even asked if she wrote her own songs or performed anywhere else. Each compliment felt like a tiny miracle, especially after years of being overlooked. But, despite the whirlwind of attention, she couldn't stop thinking about the man's offer. What did it mean? Where could it lead? When she finally returned home, her parents were waiting up for her. Their faces lit up when they saw her, and her mother immediately pulled her into a tight hug. "We're so proud of you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Her father nodded, clapping her gently on the back. "You did great out there. Really great." The girl smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. For once, she didn't feel invisible. Her family saw her, truly saw her, and that meant everything. After sharing the highlights of the evening, she hesitated before pulling out the business card. "There was this man there. He said he wants to help me," she explained cautiously. Her parents exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of pride and concern. "That's wonderful," her father said slowly, "but we need to be careful. Not everyone who says nice things has good intentions." Her mother nodded in agreement. "We'll look into it together," she added reassuringly. "If it's real, if it's safe, then maybe it's a chance worth taking." Over the next few days, the girl replayed the showcase in her mind over and over again. The applause, the tears, the producer's words, they all seemed too good to be true. Yet every time she looked at the business card sitting on her bedside table, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something bigger than herself. Meanwhile, life didn't stop moving forward. Schoolwork piled up, chores needed to be done, and her father still struggled to find steady work. Money remained tight, and there were moments when the weight of their situation threatened to pull her back down. But now, whenever doubt crept in, she reminded herself of the stage, the spotlight, and the way the audience had listened so intently. Music had given her strength before, and it would continue to carry her through. One afternoon, while practicing in the school music room, the teacher walked in with an excited gleam in her eye. "Have you checked your phone recently?" she asked, practically bouncing on her toes. The girl shook her head, confused. "Why?" The teacher grinned and pulled out her own phone, showing her a video clip. It was the recording of her showcase, performance, the one the producer had uploaded online. "What about it?" the girl asked, still not understanding why the teacher was so thrilled. "Look at the comments," the teacher urged, scrolling down the screen. Thousands of people had watched the video, and the comments section was flooded with messages of admiration and support. "This is incredible," one person wrote. "Your talent gave me goosebumps." Another commented, "Keep playing, kid. The world needs more of this." There were hundreds of similar notes, each one lifting her spirits higher. Tears welled up in the girl's eyes as she read through the comments. These weren't classmates or neighbors. These were strangers from all over the country and even the world who had taken the time to watch her play and leave kind words. For the first time in her life, she felt connected to something larger than her small, struggling town. Her music had reached people she would never meet, touching hearts in ways she hadn't thought possible. Encouraged by the response, she decided to take a leap of faith. With her parents' blessing, she called the producer. He answered on the second ring, sounding genuinely pleased to hear from her. They talked for nearly an hour, discussing opportunities and possibilities. By the end of the conversation, he had invited her to audition for a local youth orchestra program, an opportunity that could open doors she had only dreamed of. Preparing for the audition became her sole focus. Every waking moment was spent, practicing, refining her technique, and pouring her soul into every note. The music teacher stayed late with her, offering guidance and encouragement. The day of the audition arrived faster than she expected. Despite all her preparation, the girl couldn't shake the nervous energy coursing through her body. She woke up before dawn, her stomach twisted into knots, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The weight of what was at stake pressed down on her. This wasn't just about proving herself anymore. It was about taking a step toward a future where music could be more than a dream. It could be her life. Her mother helped her get ready, carefully smoothing out her clothes and brushing her hair until it shone. "You look perfect," she said softly, though the girl barely heard her. Her mind was racing, replaying every note of the piece she had chosen to perform. What if she forgot a section? What if her hands trembled so much that she dropped the bow? Worst of all, what if they didn't think she was good enough? When they finally left for the venue, a grand concert hall with towering columns and gleaming chandeliers, the girl clutched her violin case like a lifeline. Her father drove silently, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. He wasn't one to show emotion often, but today he reached over and squeezed her hand as they pulled into the parking lot. "We're proud of you no matter what happens," he said simply, his voice steady but warm. Those words stayed with her as she stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Dozens of young musicians milled about, tuning instruments, warming up their voices, or pacing nervously. Some looked confident, dressed in sharp suits or elegant dresses, while others seemed as anxious as she felt. The girl found a quiet corner to sit in, trying to calm her breathing. She opened her violin case and ran her fingers over the polished wood, drawing strength from its familiarity. This instrument had been loaned to her by the school's music program, but to her, it felt like an extension of herself. Finally, her name was called. As she made her way to the stage, her legs felt like lead, each step heavier than the last. The panel of judges sat at a long table, their faces unreadable. One of them gestured for her to begin. Taking a deep breath, she adjusted the violin under her chin, closed her eyes, and let the music take over. From the first note, something shifted. The fear that had gripped her melted away, replaced by a sense of purpose. Every practice session, every late night spent perfecting her technique, every moment of doubt, it all poured into the melody. The room grew still, the judges leaning forward slightly, their pens poised mid-air. The notes rose and fell, weaving a story of struggle and triumph, of pain and hope. When the final chord echoed through the hall, there was a brief pause before applause erupted from the panel. One of the judges, an older woman with kind eyes, wiped away a tear. "That was extraordinary," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Another judge nodded in agreement. "Your passion shines through every note. It's clear this isn't just a skill for you, it's a part of who you are." The girl stood frozen, unable to process what she was hearing. For years she had carried the weight of being underestimated, of being dismissed because of where she came from. But here, in this moment, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the music. After a brief deliberation, the head judge announced the results. "Congratulations," he said, smiling warmly. "You've earned a full scholarship to join our youth orchestra program." The words hit her like a wave, washing away every ounce of self-doubt. She felt tears streaming down her face as she bowed deeply, overwhelmed with gratitude. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. The program was rigorous, demanding hours of practice and dedication. Many of the other participants came from privileged backgrounds with access to private lessons and expensive instruments. At times the girl felt out of place among them, acutely aware of how different her life had been. But instead of letting it discourage her, she used it as motivation. She worked harder than anyone else, arriving early and staying late, determined, to prove that talent and perseverance could overcome any obstacle. Her family did everything they could to support her. Her mother sewed patches onto her worn-out bag to make it look presentable. Her father skipped meals to save money for transportation to rehearsals. And when she performed in her first official concert with the orchestra, they were there in the front row, cheering louder than anyone else. Seeing their faces in the audience reminded her why she had started playing in the first place, not for fame or recognition, but to bring joy and pride to the people she loved most. As months turned into years, the girl grew not only as a musician but also as a person. She learned to embrace challenges, to see failures as opportunities to improve. She discovered the power of community, forming bonds with fellow musicians who became like family. Most importantly, she realized that her story wasn't just hers, alone. It belonged to everyone who had ever believed in her, even when she struggled to believe in herself. By the time she graduated from the program, she had transformed from the shy, uncertain girl who once played a battered violin in a rundown gymnasium to a confident performer capable of moving audiences to tears. Yet despite her success, she never forgot where she came from. Every note she played carried a piece of her past, a reminder of the struggles that had shaped her and the resilience that had carried her through. One evening, after a particularly emotional performance, a young boy approached her backstage. He couldn't have been older than 10, clutching a small second-hand guitar. "I want to play like you someday," he said shyly, his eyes wide with admiration. The girl knelt down to meet him at eye level, her heart swelling with emotion. "You can," she told him earnestly. "All you need is to believe in yourself and keep practicing no matter how hard it gets." In that moment, she understood the true impact of her journey. It wasn't just about becoming a great musician. It was about inspiring others to chase their dreams no matter how impossible they might seem. Years passed, and the girl who once played a broken violin in a dusty gymnasium grew into a woman whose music touched hearts around the world. She had traveled far from the small town where her journey began, performing on stages that sparkled with elegance and history. Yet no matter how grand the venue or how large the audience, she never lost sight of the humble roots that shaped her. Every time she stepped onto a stage, she carried with her the memory of that first performance. The laughter turned to tears, the disbelief transformed into awe. Her career was filled with moments that took her breath away. Sold-out concerts in cities she'd only dreamed of visiting, standing ovations that seemed to go on forever, awards handed to her by people whose names she once read in books. But what truly fulfilled her wasn't the applause or the accolades. It was the way her music connected with others. After shows, fans would line up to meet her, sharing stories about how her performances had moved them. Some spoke of healing after loss. Others talked about finding courage during tough times. Each story reminded her why she had chosen this path, not for fame, but to create something meaningful. Despite her success, she made it a point to return home often. The streets of her childhood neighborhood hadn't changed much. They were still lined with cracked sidewalks and faded buildings, but the people there welcomed her back with open arms. Her family beamed with pride whenever she visited, their faces lighting up as they recounted tales of her achievements to neighbors. "We always knew you'd do great things," her father said one evening, his voice thick with emotion. She smiled, knowing full well that he hadn't always believed it. Not at first, anyway. But now, seeing the joy in his eyes, she realized how far they'd all come together. On one of her visits, she decided to organize a free concert for the community. It wasn't held in a fancy hall or under dazzling lights. Instead, it took place in the same school gymnasium where her journey had begun. The space was barely recognizable now, decorated with colorful streamers and posters made by local kids. But the memories came flooding back as soon as she stepped inside. As she stood on the makeshift stage, looking out at the crowd, she saw familiar faces, former classmates, teachers, even the janitor who had given her a thumbs up years ago. They had all shown up to support her. When she began to play, the room fell silent. The melody she chose was one she had written herself, inspired by her life's journey. It started soft and gentle, like the whisper of a dream. then built into something powerful and triumphant, echoing the struggles and victories that had brought her here. By the end, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. People clapped and cheered, but more importantly, they understood. This wasn't just a performance, it was a message of hope, a reminder that no matter how hard life gets, dreams are worth fighting for. Afterward, she spent hours talking to the audience, signing autographs and posing for photos. A young girl approached her shyly, holding a recorder tightly in her hands. "I want to learn to play like you," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. The musician knelt down to meet her gaze, smiling warmly. "You can," she replied. "Start with what you have. Practice every day and don't let anyone tell you it's impossible." She handed the girl a signed program and added, "Promise me you'll keep going no matter what." That night, as she lay in bed in her childhood home, she reflected on everything she had accomplished. Success hadn't erased the hardships of her past. In fact, she carried them with her, woven into every note she played. But those challenges had also taught her resilience, humility, and gratitude. She thought about the little girl she used to be, sitting by the window with a battered violin, dreaming of something bigger than herself. If someone had told her back then that she would one day perform for thousands of people, she wouldn't have believed it. And yet, here she was. A few months later, she received an invitation to speak at a charity gala honoring individuals who had overcome adversity to achieve greatness. Standing before an elegant crowd, dressed in suits and gowns, she felt a pang of nervousness, but not because she doubted herself. This moment mattered too much to rush through. Taking a deep breath, she began to share her story. "I didn't choose the violin because I wanted to become famous," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I chose it because it gave me a voice when I felt invisible. When I played, I could say things I couldn't put into words. Music became my refuge, my teacher, my friend. And along the way, it showed me that talent isn't about having the best instrument or the fanciest training. It's about believing in yourself, even when the world tells you not to." As she spoke, she noticed tears in the eyes of some listeners. Others nodded in agreement, clearly moved by her words. When she finished, the room erupted into applause. But the real highlight came afterward, when dozens of people approached her to thank her, not just for her music, but for her honesty. Many shared their own struggles, telling her how her story had inspired them to keep pushing forward. That night solidified something she already knew. Her purpose wasn't just to play music. It was to remind people that everyone has a gift, no matter how hidden it may seem. Her mission became clear: to use her platform to uplift others, especially those who felt overlooked or dismissed. She started visiting schools, hosting workshops, and mentoring young musicians. She encouraged them to embrace their uniqueness, to find beauty in imperfection, and to trust the process of growth. One of her proudest moments came when she founded a scholarship fund for children from low-income families who wanted to pursue music. Donations poured in from fans and supporters, allowing her to provide instruments, lessons, and opportunities to kids who might otherwise never have access to them. Watching these children pick up violins, flutes, and guitars for the first time filled her with a sense of fulfillment she hadn't known was possible. Looking back on her journey, she realized that every challenge, every tear, every sleepless night had led her to this moment. She hadn't just changed her own life, she had touched countless others, proving that art has the power to heal, inspire, and unite. Her final piece at the gala summed it all up perfectly. A hauntingly beautiful melody that spoke of struggle, triumph, and endless possibility. As the last note faded into silence, the audience rose to their feet, giving her the standing ovation she deserved, but more importantly, the one she had earned. For the girl who once stood alone on a stage, mocked and underestimated, the journey had come full circle. She had turned pain into purpose, silence into song, and doubt into determination. And as she walked off stage that night, clutching her violin close to her heart, she knew one thing for certain: her story wasn't over. It was just beginning.